Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Wanted to have a little bit of a chat here today about what I consider to be the best official emulator kind of thing that is unfortunately going to be dead by the end of the day, and something that I really hope will maybe make a comeback in the future. So, specifically today we're going to be talking about the Sega Mega Drive Classics. Now look, before we get started, make no mistake, they're definitely putting out another collection of sorts like this at some point down the road. Now, I hope that it'll be an improved version of what this one is, as has been the tradition over the years. But then I take a look over at Nintendo Switch Online and their Genesis section, and I'm like, please don't become that. Like, please don't just fully become that. Because, granted, it's kind of a double-edged thing there, because on the one hand it might finally allow for games that never had any shot in hell of ever making it to any kind of emulation collection normally. Maybe they might finally see the light of day again, the ones that were stuck in legal hell or whatever else. But on the other hand, the idea of permanently being locked out of being able to actually own any of these games to any degree sounds a bit draconian to me, which is a little dramatic, sure, but also at the same time, I know personally, there's a lot of games that I love from the Game Boy, the GBC. There's a lot of games that my wife loved on the SNES and stuff, and they just don't feel the same doing that whole Nintendo Switch Online thing. Something like this, on the other hand, feels cozy. It feels right. And it's kind of a hard thing to put into words, but for me personally, I think it kind of starts with this shelf over here. Now, we're specifically talking about the PC version here today because this is going to be a bit different on the console versions, which all basically just have like a pre-figured out collection of games. On the PC version, they had a much larger collection of games to pick from. And yes, technically, it does have a mixed review currently on Steam, just due to the fact that it doesn't technically have all the games that it used to have, because the Origins collection caused a lot of these Sonic games to disappear, but at one point it had Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles, all that kind of thing, and if we can be a little bit honest over here, it kind of sort of still does. It's just that it's in a different place now. Namely, this is the only emulation collection I've seen that allowed for kind of official modding, which is bizarre. Basically, it has this mod section. It has Steam Workshop support, and typically the stuff that you'll see is going to be like hard mode mods or just like little changes for stuff that's there. But for example, like let's say there was a official director's cut by the person who coded the original Sonic 3D. I don't know what's different about it, but it has a level editor, and that's pretty cool. But apparently, it has some additional features. And that, for example, is just something that you can load in there. But, for example, I have Sonic 2 on here, and Sonic 1, and also Sonic 2 and Knuckles, which I personally played a bunch, or Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Even though I was intending to just download Sonic and Knuckles, which I guess just went somewhere else or something. Because, yeah, personally, despite Sonic 3 and Knuckles having more content, Sonic and Knuckles by itself, which weirdly enough is not included in the Origins collection, which rude. Um, but that kind of stuff is what I personally grew up on, because like Sonic and Knuckles was the one that I had, and then Sonic 3 is what my friend had, and then one day I borrowed it. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. But also it makes the flying battery zone not the second level, and my kid self couldn't really get past. Basically, just had a constant fear of the desert level. So, seeing as Sandopolis was basically hell, I could usually just get up to the point of getting to Flying Battery Zone, and I was pretty much set. Like for me, the classic Sonic games were just like, when do I get to the best soundtrack? Okay, the game ends for me there. I honestly didn't even necessarily care for the save feature because it meant that I was skipping a lot of the better soundtracks, which was just not okay in my book. I guess it kind of indirectly caused a lifelong love of roguelikes for that reason. Or, for example, you got stuff like Shining Force, which has stuff like a hard mode or solo modes with a bunch of different characters or whatnot. But this version of an emulator where everything is just right here on your shelf is very, very, very cozy, though I will say, my god, this lady's leg does not look cozy. That looks horrific. I don't know who drew that. But the thing is, this shelf is important. The tactileness of this emulator is important, and it's actually the same reason that I know for myself and even for my kids when it came to stuff like, let's say, Nintendo Switch Online or whatever else, it was missing a certain oomph. It was missing this, right? Like it had the box arts on there, it had the information on there, it had the game on there. It occasionally would even have little challenge modes and whatever else that they would throw out there, but it was too much. Not necessarily in terms of content, but too much. There's just too much random stuff going on, as compared with the actual sort of feeling of going through your shelf for a game. It's a very kind of particular feeling of that time. Like, for example, if they were making a Game Boy emulator, the way that they frankly should be handling that is just like, oh, you gotta go rummage through your case to go find the carts in there in order to get one. Is it more annoying if you're trying to find them on, as compared with finding them on a list? Yeah, probably. Good. That's kind of how the feeling was back in the day. It's part of the charm of the system. And so, for example, the whole idea with having a Genesis back in the day, you had that moment where you had to go flick your button over. You had to go put the cartridge in there, and occasionally you would just get frustrated at a game and go immediately to something else that's right over there. You got your ass kicked in Golden Axe. Hey, guess what? It's Sonic One time. You realize that you sucked at Sonic. Oh, great. Well, I guess we're about to go play some humans. And that's actually the other benefit of this whole thing here. Because let's say something like NSO exists, sure, but they're going to have legal issues every now and then with getting games that might just simply be stuck in limbo forever. And if those happen to be your favorites, what are you going to do? Well, nothing. You basically would just go and, let's say, play them on a regular emulator or something, which is fine. It technically gets the job done, but it just doesn't, like, it feels dirty. And it's not necessarily a kind of piracy thing or whatever else thing itself. Like, even if you went and dumped the ROMs yourself, it just feels like a haphazard solution. It doesn't feel like anything. It just doesn't feel like a celebration of that thing that you used to love to play or whatever else. Instead, it just feels like this kind of dirty version of pseudo enjoying something that you used to enjoy in a way that was never really intended, in a way that typically has some kind of technical issues or what have you. Like, we're not really necessarily talking about the technical issue side of things that much, but just it has that sort of dirty feeling to it. And so, for example, in this case, okay, great. We were playing Gain Ground and stuff was going iffy. We can back out and now we can play it on a TV if we wanted to. That's all well and good. It'll just kind of play it normally. You can actually set it to have a certain degree of kind of screen angle depending on what kind of CRT you had back in the day. But all the same, if you wanted to do, let's say, fast forwards or save states or whatever else, like let's say we wanted to go back and undo our mistake from earlier, we can always just kind of keep reversing back here like it's a VHS. And I love how they do this specifically as a VHS, like it's going and just kind of unwinding whatever your gameplay was at that point. Like, it's just, dude, it's so cool. I appreciate that so much. Anyway. Let's go ahead and continue on here, kind of continue looking at everything else. But they managed to achieve the feeling of sort of being in the room with the system and, selecting all these different games or what have you, while still being essentially just an emulator of sorts, right? And at the same time, they sort of sidestepped the issue of games that would never find their way onto a collection like this, by allowing this sort of mod system here. So, like, let's say something like Cannon Fodder, I've never seen this showing up anywhere. Micro Machines is probably owned by Mattel or something at this point. Earthworm Jim 2, I know, is on the Nintendo Switch Online collection for SNES, which probably means that it's not showing up, on any Genesis collection, and maybe that's the one you grew up with. Or, like, Ren and Stimpy's thing is probably owned by MTV. That's never going to show up anywhere. The Immortal, has anybody even heard of that? Actually, come to think of it, I think that the SNES version might have potentially come out. I want to say, did that have a SNES version? I want to say I saw this officially come out somewhere. Also, weird little other side note, because I keep noticing stuff in the background. Instead of a Sony tape deck up here, it's a Tony tape deck. Anyways, let's see. We got like stuff like Road Rash. I've never seen re-released for whatever reason. That's something that my kids absolutely love because I modded a SNES Mini to have a lot of these games on there to give them that same old kind of console feeling, and they love playing on that thing. But yeah, couldn't find it on that whole Nintendo Switch Online thing. And there's just something very different about playing this stuff on paddles or having this kind of setup here. It gives it a very tactile, like special kind of feeling, you know. And it was a similar feeling with let's say like the Sonic Collection back on the GameCube, where there was enough sort of pizzazz to all of it. It wasn't trying to just be like, here's a list of everything we farted together technically legally this week. Like it wasn't an overwhelming amount of information, but it was sort of celebrating the stuff that was in front of you, if that makes sense. So it felt very natural there, where certain features were locked behind going and exploring these different games. Like you had your Sonic and Knuckles there, and then you had your Sonic 3, and then you beat them both, and now you can combine them and stuff like that. That kind of stuff just gave it that little bit of extra special feel. And so, for example, in this one, where you get an achievement for doing the thing that everybody did in Golden Axe, where you end up hitting the wrong button and using all of your magic meter on a completely empty screen, like it just gives you this idea of like, yeah, they were around at that time. They kind of know the deal here, you know. So between the games that technically are never going to come out anywhere, and the games that like let's say people have just plain never heard of, despite the fact that they actually achieved a bunch of really cool technical things, it really like a collection like this just really hits different, you know. So like for example, I absolutely loved a lot of really niche titles growing up, and I know, complete shocker. Like I loved Sub-Terrania. This is one of my favorites. I was terrible at it. I rarely got past the third or fourth level, but still would endlessly go and keep replaying this thing. And it's the closest that we ever got to a remake of this or re-release of this was a game from I want to say like 15 years ago called Pixel Junk Shooter, which was similar in concept, though it involved a lot more kind of terraforming a level with a sort of similar kind of gravity weighted thingy mechanic. Because like the general premise here is that you're going and exploring kind of exploring this mining cavern, trying to save people, trying to get specific parts that you need for later missions, and then also trying to put up with weird gravity gimmicks the whole time. So it had a surprisingly well-modeled gravity system and stuff like that, which meant that you had to play this thing very, very carefully. It's like almost a full-time version of playing Operation in a frickin' spaceship or something. Very weird game, very weird to describe. Like you got to do these little bursts, or else you'll easily run out of gas here. Some weird giant golem guy is just okay. I'm just gonna play that completely wrong. But yeah, no, very, very, very strange game. Gets dang near impossible towards the end here, which is pretty cool when you can just do this whole rewinding thing. Like, oh, guess what? Maybe I didn't get punched to death by the robot. What then? You know? What if I didn't suck at this game? So either way, again, it's just kind of the perfect way to go and re-experience this kinds of stuff, as far as I'm concerned. Like it probably doesn't have certain fancy features, like I don't know, probably some more dedicated emulators or what have you, but this is exactly right as far as I'm concerned. It's the exact kind of emulator solution that I want to see for everything. Like if I wanted to see this for something like a Game Boy, I would want to see that kind of moment where you're going and digging through your bag of carts, or with your GBA thing when you're going and specifically adjusting for the daylight on the screen, or with your SP, just to include a little minigame where you're looking for an outlet to go charge your stuff. Just add some heart of what made the original system special. It wasn't just the games. The whole thing tended to be more of an experience, The quirks of the machine were a huge part of what made them special, of what kind of made them stick out, and just kind of gives it that much more panache, I guess you could say. So that's really one of those things that I just really appreciated about this. Like, I know we'll probably never see a remake or port or whatever else of stuff like Sub-Terrania there, or the Humans, or the Incredible Crash Dummies. I don't even friggin' know who owns that IP at this point, because it hasn't been relevant in decades. Really kind of dating myself on that one. Like, who the hell's ever heard of Incredible Crash Test Dummies? That was already dated when I was a kid. So, like, that tells you something. It's weird that I even was kind of sort of a fan of that for the most oddly specific reasons of somehow it showed up in a bargain bin that I think, I forget, it was either my dad or my brother just brought home one day. It was like, here you go. It's just a freaking game. You can play it, I guess, to enjoy. And then I ended up liking that game so much that I guess my dad just assumed that I was just a fan of the IP in general. So I ended up getting this like crash test car at some point for like a birthday or something. Um, like I remember having one of those obnoxious kid moments where I kept trying to peek in the back of the car. Like, no, just stop trying to peek in the back of the car. There's nothing there. Don't worry about it. Anyway. But yeah, so yeah, that game I actually haven't seen on this list, though the workshop page for this game is freakishly long, so I also have not seen most of the stuff that's on there. So that's also neat. But yeah, the Genesis was one of those things that just it it had an absolute ton of really weird oddball games. Like, one of those disappointing things is like when this came out on, let's say, the Switch, it didn't have Ecco the Dolphin anymore. How in the actual living fuck are you going to have a Genesis collection without Ecco the damn Dolphin? Yes, it's a weird game. Yes, it somehow involves time travel and also becoming a fish and getting partially eaten by things as a solution to a puzzle, and it's also a horror game where you're a dolphin, but also, like, how do you have anything Genesis collection related without this game? Like, Tides of Time is one of the freakiest games I've ever played, and frankly, something that should be part of every collection there, and I don't know why it wasn't. Maybe it made its way to Switch Online or something? I don't actually know. I don't know. There hasn't been an Echo game in ever. Like, it's been a very, very long time. Yeah, this is a horror, like, dolphin simulator. I don't know why that's a thing. At some point, you're, like, going through all kinds of weird, forget the guy's name off the top of my head because I'm extremely tired because of a bunch of like real life shenanigans, but you know, this thing's getting delisted today, so we're making this video today. What's his face? The guy that did Aliens, or Alien, whatever. They also did designs for this, or inspired designs for this, so at some point you're basically doing the bidding of some giant DNA monster, which wants you to fight orbs or something by yelling at them, and also you're going through tubes defended by a giant sky jellyfish, and there's just like robots around now, and just friggin' like dolphins with wings, and this is just normal, and everything's fine, just go with it, you know? Very freaky vibes to this game. But yeah, very, very, very strange game. My point is, like, this console in particular was very quirky. It had a lot of weird things to it. And this particular type of emulation system, where you've got a little bit of the, original collection, you've got a good amount of customization in terms of each of these games being just like a dollar DLC that you can go pick up, rather than necessarily always just being part of that pre-canned collection. It adds a specific amount of personality to your own personal collection, to all that kind of stuff. And personally, what I would have really loved to see is just expand on this. If you're going to re-release this collection over and over again, kind of keep iterating on it, great. You know what? Honestly, I'm okay with that, because this is something that they've been doing since forever. Back on the PlayStation, they had some collections on there. They even had, Sonic and Golden Axe and Shining Force collections on the Game Boys. I mean, I own the PS2 Genesis collection. I own the PSP Genesis collection. Accidentally bought that one twice. Had the oh man, it's kind of weird how that all works. But yeah, every time it was re-released with different stuff on there. But what was cool about this, again, was just that you had your own personal favorites. You didn't have to go buy all of them. You just basically bought one of them, and it's like, it's on your shelf now. And then you buy another, it's also on your shelf now. You bought another, it's also on your shelf now. And then you just modify in the stuff that wasn't originally there, and you've got your, personal collection that you grew up with, and that's really damn cool, especially considering the attention that went into the aesthetics of this whole place. Because, like, look at this room. You got all your posters for all those original games. Sure, that's a little bit of a self-relating thing, but I will say there's a lot of very specific things that I adore. Like for example, the very '90s art that you can throw in as your borders when you're going and playing a game there. The fact that they have this dolphin plushie. Weirdly specific, I had one that was yellow growing up. So it's just cool to see there. There's a little tub of like goo over here that you had slime all over the '90s. These old timey cups and whatever else. Kind of looks like they went to Sam's Club or something. VHS tapes lying around, landline phones. Old timey super soakers and stuff like that. Stuff like these books up here. There's like, you got The Lie of Y2K and '90s fashion and apology and stuff like that. Invest in the internet now. It's a fun time capsule of stuff that is just gone now. Hell, the Sonic comics and stuff like that over here. It's just, when making a collection like this, it just, when it's presented as a good time capsule like this, it's just something I really appreciate. And the way that this one in particular was presented, I know that personally when I went and I had my kids try them, like, comparing Nintendo Switch Online, comparing with the Genesis collection, sure, you had, for example, things like the Origin collection come out for Sonic, and on paper, they added all these new features of like, hey, we got this version where now all of a sudden you don't have to worry about your kids running out of lives because they suck at this game. Instead, we're just gonna have this situation where you can just have them do infinite lives, and every new life is one of these coins they use for unlocking extra features or whatever else. And you'd think that they would love that. But instead, they love the two-player versus mode in the original. This was the version that I constantly found them playing, because they love Sonic games. They have the version on phones that's basically free. They have the version on Origins, and then they have the original on the Genesis collection. And here's the thing. The Genesis Collection version of all of this is the one they end up playing. They have Sonic Mania, a game that is design-wise a hell of a lot better, and I constantly ended up finding them playing Sonic 2 instead, with this like original CRT mode kind of thing going on, trying to figure out who the hell was Tails at any given time. Like, they loved the multiplayer on this, even though it had half the levels of the re-released version. Even though it had a worse aspect ratio, it ended up catching their interest better. This wasn't even a thing I was pushing them towards. This was literally like, look, I got you guys this version over here, and I know you had this older version before, but this one should be better. Like, no, they just preferred this 4x3 version from back in the day. Let's say when they were going and trying stuff like Mania there, it just ended up being more mechanics than they were really kind of comfortable going and playing with. Or let's say when they wanted to go do multiplayer stuff, again, they just preferred to have this sort of dirtier version of sorts. I don't know what it is about all of this specifically, but it just tended to feel more natural for them. Even stuff like a Nintendo Switch Online, again, more games, in many cases, a lot of the same games. Man, talk about flubbing a jump there. But still, like, they still ended up going and preferring this version of a lot of those same things. So to me personally, it's just the kind of tactile feel to all of it. I don't know, the very original preservation of it all. There wasn't really too much of an attempt to kind of go out of their way for direct improvements or what have you. I don't know, something about that kind of original idea for the whole thing just tended to shine through. I mean, granted, not particularly liking the phone versions is not exactly much of a shocker. A little bit of a funny story on that. Recently, if you've never tried any of those kind of like Netflix free type of dealies, Netflix ended up going and buying a bunch of pretty darn good games and just making them technically free if you have their service. It's like everybody has Netflix, so they, it basically is free. The thing is, though, what ended up happening there is that obviously you're going and probably playing these with touchscreen. Sure, technically you can attach a controller, but the whole convenience factor goes away as soon as you have a controller in your pocket. The thing is, though, like, I know when it came to, let's say, Mania there, my kids actually preferred Mania not necessarily for the actual Mania levels, but for the Puyo Puyo minigame that's in there. That they just really love that thing, and, sure, for the Switch collection and stuff for this one, you had stuff like Mean Bean Machine, and they loved playing that, but literally they just ended up going and preferring to play that out of the minigame section more than the actual game itself. Now, what's funny about this is that this happened multiple times. Like, originally, there was one of those, like, you can try, like, PlayStation Premium or whatever the hell it's called, for free for some certain amount of months during COVID. And so we had gotten that, and it's like, okay, this is pretty darn cool. And so we had Sonic Mania on there, and I ended up going and unlocking it, and they ended up liking that minigame a bunch. So then later they get it on Switch, and once again have to go unlock the minigame by going and doing all of the sphere levels over and over. And if you do the first level of Green Hill Zone in the Mania mode, you can just kind of do 2 of them back to back very quickly, and it's usually a relatively quick process, And so I ended up going and trying this again on the phone version because they got it on their phones, and apparently it just kind of shares logins and save files between them. So, okay, cool, fine, we'll just make this whole thing happen. I was there waiting for my wife at an appointment for like an hour. I got 2 of them done because the response time on the controls was just that bad. Like, you could sort of get through some of the levels, but when it came to a lot of the more precision stuff, it just plain wasn't happening. Mostly because it was constantly... They did this thing where instead of having D-pad buttons, for whatever reason they just decided, you know what? Weird analog stick kind of situation. This is what we need right here. And so it constantly would end up registering the wrong direction and whatever else if you tried to tap it. And if you didn't try to tap it, there was basically a 2-second, like, I guess not quite 2 second, but like roughly about a second worth of delay time as you're trying to drag the analog stick in that direction because it's flat and not angled. And you can't really adjust the controls at all. So yeah, it just ended up being a complete non-starter there, and I just finally told him, you know what, screw it, just play the Switch version. I just let it end. I do not want to do this anymore. I'm like, I will do a lot of weird challenge runs and whatever else, but when it comes to going and trying to do frickin' Sonic Mania, mini games on a touchscreen, apparently that's where we're drawing the line there. So yeah. Oh. I guess technically there's one of those improvements that did get made in stuff like Mania, though. It's like, yeah, gotta love getting crushed by boxes as you're trying to jump on top of them. A little bit touchy there. It's been a bit of a minute apparently. I forgot to do the weight at that point. All right. Anyway, so I've kind of gone and rambled about this a pretty decent bit. If this is the kind of thing that they like, just know that for the moment it's still out there. It's still available for you. Just for a very limited time. Technically, some bits of it are on sale. Technically, you can still buy the entire collection of all the stuff for it for I think like $25 or something. It does have a 50% discount if you buy all of them. Not necessarily recommending that, because I know personally there's a hell of a lot of stuff that I just plain don't care for on there. And I already own most of these games multiple times, but there are certain ones that I really did want to have on here. So yeah, it's kind of my nostalgic 2 cents for the day. So, maybe it's exactly the thing you're looking for. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. So, I suppose we can probably just go ahead and leave it there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh yeah, I guess technically there are multiplayer features on this, so there's that too. Also, weird note, by the way, that's not an emulator thing. That particular little jumpy thing just never wants to work. At all. For some reason, every version of the game, just that little particular jumpy thing, if you're going fast, it just plain won't work. I'm actually not entirely sure what the point is either, because it just kind of sends you down here. And you're technically worse off for taking that jump, so why would you take that jump? I don't know. Anyways, we're almost at the top, and that's when you end up getting saved. Um, anyway, though, so yeah, that'll be about that. So, let me know if you guys have tried this. Let me know what you think they're going to end up doing in the future. I'm pretty sure they'll end up going and re-releasing another collection. The sort of nightmare scenario, the sort of very unfortunately fitting for a 2025 scenario that I hope absolutely does not happen, would be if they fully submitted to NSO and just did that. In which case, like that would be so unbelievably sad that I'm not really entirely sure how that would be processed. But yeah, hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully they just release an improved version of this thing, because for what it's worth, they've generally sort of mostly swung in the direction of kind of properly going and redoing this stuff as time went on. Like for example, when it came to going and let's say we had the original versions that came out very piecemeal for a lot of older systems, and then over time this ended up changing to, let's say, the version that came out on PS2, PSP, whatever else. And in that particular case, it ended up getting save states. It ended up having a pretty decent collection of games on there. Sure, there were some weird omissions, but it seemed like they generally try to get stuff done, minus the weird omission of the Shining Force games, though I'm pretty sure that's because they also sort of came out on their own at around the same time. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever get a collection as necessarily wide as this one, but hopefully, maybe, could be, possibly, I don't know. Genuinely, I have no friggin' idea. But I really, really hope that they sort of repeat what they did here and just continue iterating on it, because this version of everything, this very tactile version of kind of what it was actually like to have a Genesis and whatever else, it's very, very nice. And if they decided to go crazier with the DLC, honestly, I wouldn't mind. Like even things like going and adding more customization to the room or whatever else would have been pretty darn neat. Like I know from it's there we go, and we'll just go ahead and undo that one too. There we go, survived. Haha, first try. But yeah, I know for me personally, like I would have loved to see more customization options as far as the bedroom and stuff are concerned. Because yeah, it's a really cool concept. It's just, it would have been cool to be able to recreate, your own bedroom from the 90s or whatever else. Like I want more of a weird soccer cushion. Like if I were to make my own version of this, right? It's just like, instead of all this, we have like soccer cushion over here somewhere. Like replace this with a soccer cushion. Turn this dolphin yellow. Instead of this thing, we have like a funky kind of inexplicable bunk bed. I don't exactly know why that happened. Like, why would you get a bunk bed? Whatever. Anyways, one of those like top bunk kind of bed type situations. Take the lights off of this, make this shelf way more shitty, but this is generally about the right idea. Maybe replace some of this with like a Game Boy in a case, and maybe like a Lego table or something. Like just randomly throw in stuff that people would have known back in the day. It just would be cool. Like, replace this desk. Actually, this desk was about right, but then replace it with, like, one of those almost drawing desk kind of situations. Found that at a garage sale for, like, $1. That was pretty cool. Replace the Super Soaker with a Nerf gun or something, and we're pretty darn close. Maybe replace this phone over here with a... Actually, I think that Nokia came way later, so, yeah, maybe not so much that. Let's see what else. Maybe... if somebody did all of this and maybe just worked in multiple emulators at once, that would be amazing. If there's one collaboration I would love to see between a bunch of corporations that otherwise probably would love to see each other burn, how amazing would it be to just have this, except you also have like a PS1 under it, and you got your PS2 over here. You pick up your Game Boy off this over here, and I know somebody made some VR version of that. That's basically that whole kind of thing, but that isn't this whole kind of thing. Like, it would be great to see an official version of that. Anyway, so I am extremely tired at the moment, though, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up at this point, because, yeah, I posted a little bit about it on the Discord, but it has been one hell of a week. Anyway, that'll be about that. Y'all have yourselves a good one. Thank you for listening to me ramble about this whole thing, and y'all have yourselves a good one. Take care.